Alright, thank you for watching. This might be my new long-term studio arrangement. Less furniture to be moved. Now I realize my camera can turn the screen backwards so I can see if I'm in the view. Why did I not realize that for so many years? I'm talking about freedom of speech again. This is a repeat of the last one, but more well organized. See? Color-coded based on categories. And category 1 is lies that have been accused against people who are making a claim on their free speech rights. There have been people who said, I have a freedom of speech, and then people say, well, you mean this thing that's really bad. And no, the person didn't mean that. Specifically, yelling fire in a crowded theater. The extreme vast majority, there are billions of people in this world, so there might be somebody who actually is claiming a right to yell fire in a crowded theater. Obviously, in that hypothetical scenario, there is no fire because it's a good idea if there is a fire that you tell people so they don't get burned up. But if there's no fire and then people die in a stampede, then that's a bad thing. The difference between free speech, which people are usually claiming when they claim their free speech rights, and yelling fire in a crowded theater is that yelling fire in a crowded theater is causing harm, and you're not giving any information to people, or useful information. False information is not useful information. Objective falsehoods is not protected by freedom of speech. Speech that causes violence or death is not a freedom of speech, especially if it's, falsehoods. Now, violence. Some people have been accused, oh, you want freedom of speech, you want hate speech. You want to get people hurt. Virtually nobody, since there are millions of people, there might be some idiot who actually said, no, it's my freedom of speech to tell somebody you go kill him. But the vast majority of people, when they say they want their freedom of speech, that they demand their fundamentally human rights be respected, are not talking about planning a bank robbery or encouraging a beatdown or some other violence. There have been people who actually, next category, claims about freedom of speech I've actually heard that were not really freedom of speech. There actually is a supreme anarchist ruling. Supreme Court. Ruling where they ruled that there are certain circumstances where it does count as freedom of speech. If burning down a building can actually count as freedom of speech. That's not a legitimate constitutional Supreme Court ruling. When our founding fathers wrote freedom of speech in the Constitution, they did not mean burning down buildings because you have a disagreement. No reasonable person, even outside of the United States of America, who's just trying to follow the principle behind the First Amendment, will think that burning a building, burning a car, rioting is your freedom of speech. Pornography. There have been people who claimed they have a First Amendment freedom of speech and freedom of the press to print, sell, make pornography. Of course, that's not what that freedom is about. Some people who have claimed that freedom of speech covers pornography deny the actual freedom of speech and real speech that is important to be protected. Just in case there's some idiot on the other end of this computer who's watching this and screaming at their computer, no, wait, you're such an uptight Um, if you think pornography is covered and you want to yell insults at me, I take those as a compliment. Um, you having pictures of sex, you describing sex, has absolutely nothing to do with me talking about scientific facts, reasons to doubt an alarmist prediction, uh, ideas about what government program will work and not work, how the government should define or treat marriage, what punishments should be given, which country you should be at war with and at peace with and allied with and against, which politician actually said what, wants to do what, all those things. Can you really, you're really claiming that there's some, the description of sex belongs in that same category as those other things I just said? Interrupting other people's speech. I have actually seen this. It was, who it was doesn't matter. But there was a college auditorium. There was a speaker, and he had to stop, and he said, I'm not going to continue on till the certain person who interrupted him multiple times was escorted out by security. And that idiot who was being escorted out by security claimed his freedom of speech. No. Your freedom of speech does not let you interrupt somebody else. Whether in a formal or informal setting, if you're, get a loudspeaker at Speaker's Corner, where it's an informal setting, jumping in between two people and shouting them down when they're at the park, or a formal setting like an auditorium where there's a speaker at one end or at a podium. That idiot's freedom of speech would let him, after the meeting, and the guy took questions after the meeting, the speaker, so if he had a really good point to make, there was a way to do it. But even if there was no questions after the speaker, his freedom of speech was not to interrupt the speaker, but to talk to people after. Wait outside of the auditorium, quietly sit in the auditorium, and after the event's over, say, hey, he was so wrong. Talk to somebody else after, when the speaker's done, the speech is over, the meeting is done. Alright, he was so wrong because of this. Here's how he was wrong, here's why he was wrong, here's some facts. Or rent the auditorium for himself. Or rent another auditorium and give a speech. That is your freedom of speech, not to interrupt. Now, miscellaneous. I'm not sure if people have ever claimed that they had a freedom of speech when they're telling complete obvious lies. But you do not have a freedom of speech to call people Nazis who are actually not Nazis. That has actually happened in this modern world now. In fact, it happens so often, more often than not, when somebody's accused of being a Nazi, they're not. They're actually the opposite of a racist socialist. They're not racist at all, and they're not socialist, and they don't want to kill anyone because of their skin color. I'm not sure if this falls under miscellaneous because I'm not sure if I've heard anyone actually claim it. Classified information. It's not a violation of your freedom of speech. Now, when I say classified, there's a category of law in the United States of America that is important military and or government information that you don't get to talk about. It has to be kept in the military, in the government, and even then there's limits. You don't get to find out information for fun because you're in the military. You have to have a need to know. You have to be involved in some operation that uses that information. You don't just get to get bored on your lunch break when you're in the military because you've got top secret security clearance and flip through, classified information. You have to be on the operation. Now, I'm not claiming that the classified laws are pristine and perfect, but to the degree that those classified laws are being used to prevent spread of military knowledge that would give opponents of the United States of America an advantage in a war against us, whether that's where our troops are, how many troops there are, what our materials are used to make our military equipment, weaknesses of our military equipment, if there's a material that our radar can't detect, or if there's a material, some way to jam our radars that we've discovered, a weakness in our military radar system. That is not something of a First Amendment freedom of speech to talk about with people. Now, do our classified laws sometimes get too broad and prevent? They're not supposed to. It's written into the classified law system. It's not supposed to be used to protect incompetency or corruption. But, if you do have a First Amendment freedom of speech to do what's right for your country, and exposing corruption is right for your country. So, that's my list of things that freedom of speech is not. Have a good day. Thanks for watching.